Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something, well, maybe a little unexpected. We always talk about AI, right?
Mhm.
How amazing ChatGPT is, how it can do this and that.
Seems like there's a new headline every day.
Exactly. But this time, you send over an article that asks a kind of different question. It's about ChatGPT, sure, but from the perspective of, well, loneliness. And what's even more fascinating is that this research comes straight from the folks who created ChatGPT, OpenAI, and MIT Media Lab.
Yeah, definitely caught my eye too.
So in this deep dive, our goal is to break down this study, really unpack it and try to figure out what it means for all of us, especially anyone out there who's used AI chatbots or even just thought about it. Because let's be real, who hasn't been curious?
Right. And to start, I think it's important to acknowledge just how in-depth this study was. As the article explained, it wasn't a small-scale thing. We're talking about millions of actual conversations that people had with ChatGPT, both text and voice. Then, on top of that, they surveyed over 4,000 users. And finally, they even did a 4-week experiment where 1,000 people used ChatGPT daily.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It really is. And I think that layered approach is important because it lets the researchers look at the relationship between AI use and loneliness from multiple angles.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just saying, oh, these two things are connected. They're trying to understand why and how.
Okay, so let's get to the heart of it. What did they actually find?
Well, the main takeaway, and it is a bit of a surprise, is that there seems to be a correlation between how much people use ChatGPT and how lonely they feel. In other words, the more someone used ChatGPT, the more likely they were to report feelings of loneliness. And here's the thing. It wasn't just about the frequency. The study also found that people who said they trusted ChatGPT more or felt like they were bonding with it were even more likely to experience loneliness and even dependence on the AI.
That's really interesting and a little concerning, to be honest. I mean, when you consider that ChatGPT has, what, hundreds of millions of users every week?
Yeah, the sheer scale of its use is mind-boggling. So we're not talking about a small group of people here. This potentially has implications for a huge chunk of the population.
So how did they figure all of this out? You mentioned different parts of the study, right?
Right. They took a two-pronged approach. The first part was all about analyzing that mountain of data they collected, those millions of chat logs and audio recordings. It's incredible to think about the kind of computing power it must have taken to sift through all of that and identify patterns.
Yeah, it's way beyond my laptop's capabilities.
Mine too. And alongside the data analysis, they also conducted those surveys we talked about. Remember, over 4,000 users. This gave them a window into how people perceived their own interactions with ChatGPT and how they felt about those interactions.
Okay, but people aren't always the best judges of their own behavior, right? I mean, sometimes we say one thing but do another.
Exactly, and the researchers knew that. That's where the second part of the study, the controlled experiment, comes in. They had 1,000 participants commit to using ChatGPT every single day for at least 5 minutes, over a whole 4 weeks,
That's pretty hardcore dedication to chatbotting.
for science. But seriously, having that kind of controlled environment allowed them to see how people actually interacted with the AI, not just what they said they did. And this combination of data crunching, surveys, and the experiment led them to some pretty clear findings.
So what were the main takeaways? What did this whole big experiment reveal?
Well, it confirmed that correlation we talked about. The more someone used ChatGPT daily, whether they typed or talked to it, the more they reported feeling lonely, dependent on the AI, and, this is interesting, they were less likely to engage in social activities with other people.
So like they were substituting real-life interaction with chatbotting.
It seems that way, yeah. And the study also used this phrase, problematic use, which is a little bit vague, but when you put it all together, it suggests that people might start relying on ChatGPT for things that they would normally turn to other people for, like emotional support or even just companionship.
Yeah, I can see how that could become problematic over time.
Exactly. It's not that using ChatGPT is inherently bad, but if it starts replacing your human connections, that's when you might want to step back and think about how you're using it.
So basically everything in moderation.
Exactly. And it's not just about how much you use it, but how you use it. Now, this is where things get even more interesting. The study also looked specifically at voice interaction with ChatGPT, and they found something kind of surprising.
Oh, like whether you typed or actually spoke to it.
Yep. At first, the data showed that using your voice to interact with ChatGPT might actually be less associated with loneliness and dependence than just typing. It's like having a more natural conversational flow like you would with another person might have offered a little bit of protection against those negative feelings.
That makes sense. It's more like a real conversation, so maybe it feels less isolating.
Right. But, and this is a big but, that apparent benefits seem to be temporary and fade away as people used it more. And here's the kicker. This fading effect was even stronger when the voice chatbot had what they called a neutral tone.
Neutral. Meaning it just sounded like a, I don't know, a robotic voice.
Yeah, basically, like a standard computer voice that doesn't try to match your emotions or anything like that. So if the AI just sounded flat, any positive impact on loneliness seemed to disappear with repeated use.
Wow, so even if it's talking to you, if it doesn't sound human, it doesn't really help.
That's what the data suggests. Now, they also tested what they called an engaging mode, where the AI was programmed to be more expressive, show some feelings.
So like a more empathetic AI, I guess.
Exactly. And you might think that having an emotionally responsive chatbot would make a difference, but even then, the study found that if you used it a lot, those initial benefits still tended to fade over time. So no matter how the AI talked, neutral or engaging, heavy use was still linked to those negative social outcomes.
It's like you can't fool your brain into thinking it's a real person, no matter how good the AI gets.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah.
And that really gets to the heart of this whole issue. We're so good at connecting with other people, but can we really have that same kind of connection with a machine, even a really sophisticated one?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think. And it's interesting because this study came out around the same time that OpenAI released GPT 4.5, which is supposed to be even more intuitive and emotionally intelligent.
Oh, yeah. That was a big deal. And it makes these findings even more relevant because if we're seeing these correlations with the AI we have now, what happens when it gets even better at mimicking human interaction? Will the effects be even stronger? Could these more advanced models create even stronger but ultimately artificial bonds that push us further away from real human connection?
That's a pretty big question.
It is. And I think that's what makes the study so important. It's not about demonizing AI or saying we should never use it.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the potential risks and benefits and using this technology in a way that's healthy and supports our overall well-being.
So, for our listeners out there, what's the main takeaway from all of this? What should we be thinking about?
I think the most important thing is to be mindful. Be aware of how you're using AI, especially chatbots like ChatGPT. If you find yourself using it a lot, and especially if you start feeling like you're relying on it for emotional support or companionship, it might be time to step back and think about how it's affecting your real-life relationships.
That makes sense. It's like anything else, really. Too much of a good thing can be bad for you.
Exactly. And it's not just about the quantity, but the quality of those interactions. Are you using AI to enhance your life or to replace things that should be coming from real people? That's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
Well said. And as AI keeps getting more sophisticated, I think this conversation is only going to become more important.
Absolutely. And it raises a really profound question for all of us to consider. As AI evolves and becomes more natural and seemingly empathetic, what will happen to our understanding of companionship and connection? Will those ideas change? And if so, what role will we need to play in preserving genuine human connection in a world that's increasingly populated by incredibly advanced artificial intelligence? Something we all need to think about, and it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for diving into this with me.
My pleasure. It's always a good discussion.
And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep those brains engaged and stay curious.